what episode number this is.
We should just start making it random, dude. This is like episode
27.
number 444.
I think it's 8.
I think it's 8 too, but I want to be sure. Okay, yeah. All right, we all ready? Everybody ready? You good? Anybody need beer or anything now? All right, are we recording?
We are.
Cool. Welcome to the Strength Athlete Podcast, episode number 8. Today we're going to be talking with Preston Turner, who is someone who's made a really successful transition from equipped to raw lifting, which is something that we're seeing a little bit more and more of. You can think of some top-level guys that have done that pretty successfully. Someone like Brett Gibbs comes to mind. Brett has gone from a pretty successful equipped lifter to a tremendously successful raw lifter. And it's an interesting parallel, and I'm kind of excited to talk more about that. Before we get into that, just introduce everyone we have on the call. We've got Eric Bodhorn, Bryce Lewis, as well as obviously Preston Turner. If you guys want to say what's up.
Hello.
What up?
Hey, what's going on?
Sweet. And before we get into it, just a quick thanks to our sponsor, LBD Fitness. And I feel like my computer is frozen. Can you guys still hear me?
Yep, you're good, man.
All right, cool. Weird. A quick shout out to our sponsor, LBD Fitness. Helps make this podcast possible. They are providing clean water with every single item purchased. If you want to check them out, I believe it is lvdfitness.com. And then a quick little self-pimping moment. If you guys are interested in some sweet T-shirts and supporting the members of the Strength Athlete traveling to Belarus this year, we are running a pre-order on those. It is going for about 3 more weeks, and basically that's $25, and 100% of profits on those shirts are going to go to supporting the team traveling there. If you don't know, it is expensive to travel to Belarus, and we are all deeply feeling that right now. And so we are trying to help offset some of that expense and some of that pain for our people that are going. Anyway, so let's talk about Preston Turner a little bit. You, sir, are decorated. That's kind of the best term we can use here. Preston is 24 years old, four-time IPF world champion, which, you know, it's reasonably impressive. Kind of scaled your way through the junior classes and have worked your way into the open, and tremendously competitive now as an open lifter. You've made, 6 national teams. You were collegiate champion all 4 years you were eligible. You've won the Pro Bench twice, and this year you won the Pro American in the 120 kilo class, just edging out, who was it you were competing with? It was
Matt Sommer.
And I was actually looking at the totals this year and looking at kind of the results of the 120 kilo class. And right now, based on who's competing, I think you are only edged out by, well, I wouldn't call it edged out. The only person ahead of you is Dennis Cornelius. And
yeah, it's a little more than edged out.
yeah. While you have about a pinky beyond Anthony Harris, Dennis Cornelius has about an arm beyond everyone else.
Yeah.
But you know, he kind of falls into a different human category. That guy is fascinating and a whole different subject, kind of. But anyway, so to begin with, let's talk a little bit about equip lifting. How'd you get started? What kind of got you into it, and really, when did you start?
Yeah, so I started my freshman year in high school. And so in Texas, powerlifting is a varsity sport, and it is all equipped. There is no raw. Everybody competes equipped. The schools have boxes and boxes of equipment. The equipment isn't always the best, and it isn't always what the type of equipment that, you know, many of the guys in the IPF and the USAPL are using. A lot of it is older equipment, less supportive. But nonetheless, I mean, you've got I think close to 20,000 competitors across the state, and it is all equipped. So, you know, for the first 4 years of my powerlifting, that's all I ever knew. Well, I mean, and beyond that, but that's all there was. And, you know, for a lot of us in the Texas high school powerlifting scene, up until recently, I think with the use of social media and stuff, a lot of us didn't even know there was powerlifting outside of high school.
It's pretty crazy to put that 20,000 number into context, considering that right now USA Powerlifting has about half of that in total national membership.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, if you were to really kind of zoom out even further and compare this, so I mean, the 2 biggest organizations nationally are USAPL and USPA, period. And so not counting any of the mini federations, that's about 2/3 of the amount of total membership at the end of last year for all powerlifting organizations contained just in high schoolers in Texas. Mm-hmm. So if you're talking per, like, the number of 16-year-olds that are competing in the United States at any level are higher than the number of any other age combined, probably, which is insane. That's absolutely insane.
Because the state championship alone, if I would try to picture it in my head, it's in the same place every year in Abilene, Texas. But it's in like a rodeo arena. And
awesome.
I believe there's close to 2,000 lifters at the state meet. Probably between at least between 1,500 and 2,000, somewhere around there. And there's, I think, 10 platforms, maybe even up to 12.
2 months, 10 platforms.
It's insane.
We're all complaining about 5 days for Raw Nationals, and you're like, 17 days with 10 platforms.
This is an organizational Olympia right there. Anyways,
because they even have the girls championship meet separately. It's a separate weekend, and it's maybe just as big, as many platforms, but it's a separate weekend. They have the boys state and the girls state.
So Preston, let me ask you, what do you think makes lifting in Texas so big, and what do you think makes equip lifting in Texas so big?
Like it's the driven by the high school programs. It is a varsity sport, so it's on the same level as your football and your volleyball. Maybe the participation isn't quite as high as those, but it is a varsity sport. So anybody who, and a lot of times, honestly, the football teams, the football coaches, make it mandatory to do powerlifting in the spring. So you get great participation that way. And because it is equipped, that's why you have the level of success that you do in equipped lifting from Texas. Because the thing about equipment is it takes time, and it takes coaching. It takes a team to help. And you get that from the moment you start for at least 4 years, if you continue all 4 years, and then you're able to go beyond, and you're already relatively seasoned by the time you get out.
I think that's really cool. Sorry to interrupt you, Eric, but I think that's really cool that football coaches encourage that. I went to a high school that's local here in Orange County, California, and the football team isn't all that great anymore, but the strength program has been tremendous year after year, churning out 10 to 20, 500 plus, 600 plus squatters, guys who are benching 400. I mean, it looks horrendous, but and people, we never trained the deadlifts, but and kids that could power clean like 300 pounds when they were 17. And so it's just an insane strength program. And I mean, I remember I've approached the coach on a couple separate occasions and asked him, I'm like, let me take some of your kids and take them to a powerlifting meet. I don't want to coach them or anything, but let me have them lift. They're going to do great. They could go to the world level. And it's just, he just basically completely shut me down. He said, nah, they don't need something else to focus on in the spring. They're already too focused on their lifting. They're going to get hurt, blah, blah, blah. And it's cool to see the culture difference. And maybe it's because of the equipment, or maybe it's just because Texas is more awesome than sports in California. But by the sounds of it, in my opinion, it is. But I don't know. It's just a cool observation for me to see that the football coaches would encourage that.
Mm-hmm.
Eric, go ahead.
So is it just something where you compete in the spring and then it allows you to still compete in the other sports in the fall, like soccer or football or basketball?
Yeah. It's just it does conflict. I mean, you will see this, especially at smaller schools, but it does conflict with other spring sports because it's from January to maybe the first weekend of April. I think the boys' state meet just passed. I'm sure some of y'all had seen that Joseph Pena squat of over 1,000 pounds. That was at the state meet.
And then are the powerlifting coaches involved with it beyond just the competitive season? Like, are they doing any of the athletes training outside of that competitive season?
So the powerlifting coaches are usually almost always one of the football coaches.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So typically powerlifting season is just kind of a from January to April thing, and then it's back to football mode.
Gotcha.
And even at least at my high school, during powerlifting season, like during our football period or whatever, powerlifting was after school. I mean, we were still doing football drills, and we were still doing our running and our conditioning and stuff. When it is powerlifting season, it's not 100% full devoted to powerlifting season.
Yeah.
And one thing that is interesting especially from our perspective and the way the kind of the mindset behind competing in the USAPL and I guess outside of the USAPL, everybody outside of high school, they compete every weekend.
That's crazy.
So there's a meet every weekend.
Well, it kind of makes sense why, like, a lot of programs that you've seen, Texas Method and stuff like that, are structured around going heavy once a week. It kind of caters to that style of how often you need to test because you're competing.
Mm-hmm.
And at that age, you're probably going to be making pretty rapid progress anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. Preston, I can totally understand a lot of the football guys doing powerlifting in their off season and then, getting back into football later on. How do a lot of the girls get into it? If that's not their gateway.
A lot of times the girls are either cheer. Sometimes you'll see some volleyball. Most of the spring girls, you'll see some softball. But a lot of times it's, the powerlifting coaches working with the cheer coaches or whatever the other coaches are, whether they're sports, and really encouraging. But you typically see a lot of success amongst cheerleaders for sure. They'll usually come out and do really well. And I know, at least, in my high school and in other high schools, you would typically see that some of the regional and state competitors, they're from different backgrounds, but you did see a lot of cheerleaders and softball players, things like that.
I'm definitely seeing a parallel here with our good friend and someone who everybody loves, LS McLean, who is himself as I understand it, kind of a specialized cheerleading coach. Runs these camps kind of all over the country, and his stats speak for themselves, benching 2.5 times body weight, and I believe he's from Texas as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he's the cheer coach at Texas State in San Marcos.
So changing the subject just a little bit, I've been cruising through some World Championship results here, Preston, looking at 2016 and 2015 in the 120 kilo class, and I was looking through the USAPL database results, and by the looks of it, you've got a total that would qualify you for a podium spot at this point, or fifth place.
Yeah, I've got an outside shot, and here recently, the numbers have just exploded on the world level. My weight class equipped. I set the American record total at 10:42.5. I think 22:98.
Yeah.
And at nationals in 2016. And that would have been good enough for a world championship. Just a couple of years ago, that would have won worlds. But here recently, I think there was 3 over 1,100 kilo total. And that's just insane to think that I've got to add over 130 pounds to my total currently. It's been incredible growth, and it is very competitive on the world level in the equipped lifting.
Right. Well, I'm just looking at the scoring here, and I mean, your total. Let's say you had a modest 5% improvement on your total, which for you is 50 kilos, but that puts you in like third place and potentially could just edge the U.S. up to first place on the points in the nation scale, because we actually don't have a finisher by the looks of it in the 120 class from this year in Open Worlds. So that just something cool to think about. It's awesome that you're that competitive, and I don't think a lot of people have perspective on just how deep the competition is in equipped lifting when you're talking about Eastern Europe and those kind of, well, I guess Russia, I would say Northern Asian countries, but that's just Russia. There's an insane amount of competitors and lifters coming out of there, where the equipped lifting culture it's kind of like Texas spread over a whole continent, and it's like that there. And so they have these insanely skilled lifters coming out of there. I mean, a guy like Blaine Sumner is such a standout, being this good from the U.S. As an equipped lifter, and so it's cool to see that you were coming up to potentially kind of be there right alongside him as kind of a flag waving, proud and loud American among all of those Eastern Europeans. And so I don't know, I'm kind of excited about that. So coming back on topic, you recently or semi-recently kind of transitioned to Raw starting at 2015 Raw Nationals, or in 2015?
Yeah, that was my first Raw meet, yeah.
And so what was kind of the path of events that led you to make the choice to compete at Raw Nationals?
So actually, training for 2014 Junior Worlds, I had a hamstring injury. I was training really late, strained my hamstring, and I kept training. I had Worlds coming up, so I think there was some biomechanical compensations going on that led to some pretty horrible patellar tendonitis. And so after 2014 Junior Worlds, I took a hiatus from squatting and such, and started to try to train again, and I couldn't. It put me out for I think 8 months.
Oh, wow.
And so I missed. I missed nationals, equip nationals. And so then I finally started physical therapy up and worked to improve it, and I made an improvement that summer. And so I was like, well, if I can't compete at Worlds, equip Worlds, I already missed equip nationals, I'll give this raw thing a try. And obviously that's the direction the sport's heading. And so, I'll go ahead and compete at Raw Nationals.
Okay, is that something you're planning on doing both going forward, or are you trying to dedicate to one or the other?
I haven't decided yet. I am going to try to stick with Raw for a little while. I'm definitely not done with equipment. It is difficult to kind of do them simultaneously. But my current situation, I just kind of train alone in my garage. It's super tough with equip lifting, and kind of with my work schedule as well. You have to be able to devote a pretty decent amount of time to your equip training sessions. And so really, and I've been dealing with a shoulder injury, and that was from me benching in my shirt by myself. I kind of squeezed myself into it. Probably wasn't seated right, but unracking 300 kilos by when you don't lift off, just unracking 300 kilos, I think it kind of tore my shoulder up. And so until I can be able to get a little bit of help and maybe get a training crew together, I think Raw is just kind of the way to go for me for a while.
It's funny you mentioned that. I actually have no idea what unracking 300 kilos alone feels like.
You know what I mean, Preston?
No,
you guys all know what I'm talking about.
I 100% do not know. But I can totally say that I've watched people do that, a select few, probably 10 or less. Yeah. But I can imagine. I mean, I've unracked up to like probably, I don't know, like 93 or 94% of my 1 rep max when I was prior to my shoulder injuries. And if I didn't do it just right, I felt like crap, and I wasn't wearing a shirt. And for anyone listening, if you don't understand the sheer technical complexity involved in benching in a shirt, it is not easy. And I mean, a lot of people have this impression that you like put a shirt on and suddenly you bench 500, and it doesn't work that way, believe it or not. I was in Colleen with Bryce and Eric, and actually the whole TSA crew was there. Yeah. And we were downstairs training, and it was Adam Palmer, the owner of 9 for 9 Media. He had like an Inzer, what was it? It was a Titan F6.
F6, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, this is like the loosest and least compressive of the shirts, the easiest to groove in, the easiest to, frankly, to not fuck up. And God, I couldn't even get like 80% of my bench max to move comfortably. I couldn't even touch my chest with 100%. Yep. And so it's just, but then I couldn't load up anymore because I couldn't lock it out. So it's just this weird kind of combination of items that you have to be good at. And that kind of really gave me some perspective. I was kind of a traditional, I won't say equipped hater, but I didn't fully appreciate it until I tried on a shirt. And I think that a lot of people should get the opportunity, or take the opportunity if they get the chance to do so they can fully respect the things that someone like you, Preston, or someone like Blaine Sumner does when they're moving those kind of weights. And what you mentioned about your training schedule and your work schedule, to use Blaine as an example again, I mean, that guy works like 60 hours a week and somehow manages to get through all of his training. I was listening to a podcast he did with Juggernaut recently. He said it takes him an hour and a half just to get to his top set on squats, to his first set, and then everything else on top of that.
Yeah, it's not crazy. To mention the chicken shakes. Preston, I had so many questions for you on what equip training is like, and how that differs from your raw training when you're prepping for a big competition, and like even when you're equip lifting, how much of that training is raw. So can you kind of take us through what a typical week would look like for you in equip training, and kind of the same thing for raw, and then we'll maybe ask some questions from there?
Yeah. So I follow pretty similar structures as far as It's usually a 3 to 4 days a week. Mondays are my squat focus, with a lighter bench, or like kind of an alternate bench, like a close grip bench, and opposite of competition deadlift. So I'll do my conventionals on Monday. Wednesdays is going to be bench focus, with typically a front squat, or a high bar pod squat, something like that. And Fridays are going to be deadlift focus, with typically a high bar pod squat, and I will do my competition deadlift, and then I will do another light bench day. So that kind of follows true for both equipped and raw lifting. The difference is with equipped, whenever my focus day, so Monday being squat, I'm doing my squats equipped. I'll work up raw to usually kind of the 6 plate range maybe, and then I'll throw in my squat suit, and then on bench, and then on that Monday, my other lifts are raw. On the bench focus day, in my shirt for bench, but the other lifts are raw, and on Friday I'll be in my deadlift suit, and my other lifts are raw.
So over the course of even one of your equipped weeks, we're really talking about like 9 total equipped reps per week. Maybe you work up to some triples or some 5s or less even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, typically I won't go over 5s in equipment. And I follow kind of, in terms of the training cycle as a whole, I'll still follow a linear periodization type, kind of the progressive overload, but you have other variables to consider with your equipment. It's not just straight progression, because you use different amounts of equipment for different percentages. So you've got that to factor in as well.
So are you saying you might do like briefs only, or like wear your squat suit with your straps down or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. Basically, like kind of rule of thumb for a lot of the top guys, a lot of the guys that I trained with and worked with, and kind of how I approach it as well. Typically, I only wear my straps for 90% plus of my equipped max. Everything below that is going to be straps down. And then I always wear knee wraps first. So you can kind of think of it as like an actual progression from raw to equipment. What's slightly more than raw is going to be raw with wraps. So then you put on your wraps. After that, then you're going to put on your suit bottoms with your wraps, and you just kind of keep building them from there. I'll see some guys throw their squat suit on without their knee wraps, and that squat suit can kind of put you in different positions than your raw. And so I like really having that knee support and having my knee wraps if I'm going to have my suit bottoms on.
So just for reference, when we're talking about working up to 6 plates or 585, that's still roughly 80% of your raw max, right? Since you squatted like 750 at the Arnold. Mm-hmm. So you're still working up to somewhere around 80% raw before you get into your gear, which is still a fairly high percentage.
But the thing is I will do it, to quote Chance Mitchell and kind of the sub-max boys. So, maybe I would normally do my 85% for triples. I might hit it for a single before I throw on my gear. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Preston, I had a question. A lot of equipped training that I've seen, in addition to doing the equipped lift, they'll also get in like some variations that are specific to equipment, like slingshot stuff, pressing to blocks and stuff like that to really work on the weak points of the equipped lift. Do you ever play with any of that stuff?
Yeah, board pressing is huge.
Okay.
Because honestly, in your bench shirt, touching anything below 90% is just incredibly difficult. So to be able to get good work in, we work off the boards, so that you can still kind of replicate, get a touch in, get a pause in, and go from there. Also, your bench shirt, you're going to get a lot of pop off your chest, a lot of spring off your chest. But at kind of the top, maybe quarter of the lift, and maybe even a little bit more, that shirt is not really supporting you anymore. So lockout is huge in equipped lifting. Yeah. You've got to train your triceps really strong, and the board presses really kind of help replicate that same range of motion, increase your time under tension during that point where your body really needs to take over and that shirt isn't supporting you anymore.
Yeah.
As an aside to that, I think that's why when you look at very traditional West Side style training, a lot of what they train is those top portions of the lifts, because that's training geared very specifically towards multiply lifters. And where Preston says you get a lot of pop off your chest in a single ply shirt, if you basically took that shirt and put another tighter shirt on over it and then another tighter shirt on over that, you're getting more than a little pop off your chest. You know, you basically, you need like 800 pounds in your hands to even get to your chest.
Everything is a spot press.
Exactly. Precisely. It's you have this range of motion where the only time you ever see it is when you're actually doing maximal weights. It's just impossible to get to it. And you know, as much as we give crap about, well, I guess we don't really give crap, but as much as I hear people give crap about multiply lifters getting to depth and all those things, which by and large they absolutely don't, but some of them do. But it's got to be tremendously difficult. I see how some of you guys struggle to get to depth in single ply gear. Just imagine wearing another squat suit. What's that got to be like? I mean, I don't even want to. That's like a nightmare for me, and I don't even want to wear my singlet sometimes. And so it's crazy to think about like a super thick, super tight singlet with an extra layer. And so it's, you know, one of the reasons why we say things like traditional West Side training is maybe not ideal for raw is because, you know, as much as having tremendously strong triceps is going to be awesome for your bench, assuming you can get it to be 3 inches from lockout, you know, there's a whole other 8 or 9 inches of range of motion there. Or if you're talking about some of these Japanese guys, there's a whole other 8 or 9 millimeters of range of motion to train there. And you know, it's you have to account for that. And so it's, you know, I've given my opinion on conjugate style training plenty of times, and you know, it's not really a style that I agree with, at least not in its purest form. But it's certainly something to consider, that's a really fundamental difference between training for equip lifting and the far equipped side being multiply, obviously, and then raw, where, you know, you kind of have just, it's all about range of motion, where you need to have all of your strength, I think.
Exactly. And that's where I personally do to train that top half of my squat. But with deadlift, you know, block pulls and rack pulls are a big portion as well, because again, off the bottom of, you know, off the floor, you know, that's where you get your support, but the lockout is, you know, where you really take over. So things like block pulls and rack pulls are going to be really helpful. And I think that's where raw lifting has really helped my equipped deadlift, is that it's taught me so much more how to be patient at the bottom. Because I had always lifted equipped, so I'm always springing up real quick from the bottom, getting a lot of support. And when I started raw, I was like, you know, that was one thing that always got to me, is like, if it didn't start moving right away, I was like, because I was so used to it coming off the floor so quickly. So raw lifting really helped my equipped deadlifting, and the fact that it really helped my speed and my positioning and everything off the floor, and my patience, my mindset off the floor and through the middle of the lift. And then I'm able to do what I do at the lockout.
Preston, I've seen, I was at a few competitions very early on when I came to Colorado here, and I saw these young kids coming out with like the tightest equipment. Like the suit was like folding them over in the bottom of the squat, like rotating their pelvis because it's so tight. Can you speak a little bit to the tightness of equipment generally? Like, is that something that you progress? Do you start looser and then you end up with more tight equipment? Does it just take getting used to? Like, how do you determine like what's the tightness, and is tighter always better?
Absolutely. There's absolutely a progression with that. And even in my own training, and as long as I've been doing equipment, I utilize, I don't really know of anybody else that does something like this, but I utilize older, I guess you would call it technology equipment, to start with. And there's equipment that supports, but it's stretchy. And then I'll progress to looser fit, non-stretch equipment. So like your NXG Plus, they call it. So like your Titan Centurion and your Inzer TRX, things like that. And then I'll progress to competition fit throughout my training cycle. So like with people just starting, I always recommend like get it looser. We don't want to, you know, have breakdown in your form. We want to keep that going. And, you know, you have to learn the gear. It's like I don't like taking the whole sink or swim approach where you automatically throw somebody in a jack super katana because they need to be able to bench in an F6 first, and then you progress from there. So, and then once you get to the competition the competition equipment, the better stuff that's out now, then you progress tightness. And personally, myself, I do not wear my gear tight at all. I really like to rely on my raw strength, and I've noticed when my gear tightens up, just the amount of pressure and it's really fatiguing, getting the eccentric component of the lift. And so I've noticed I get to a point where as my gear gets tighter, my lifting, there's a diminishing returns on that. My lifting actually gets a little bit worse. So I wear my gear much looser than most.
That's really interesting. With the fact that you were talking about that progression, like, you just don't see that in Raw, and it kind of makes it seem like that would be fostering of a really much of community feeling, because, you mentioned 6 different shirts, or, you've got shirts and then you've got suits as well, and you're not going to buy all those yourself, so oftentimes you're trading or borrowing or sharing equipment with other people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a ton of help from other people. In fact, there's been a gear swap on the USAPL page that's kind of started up, and it's kind of a way to help people out a little bit. I know I've got older equipment that I'll help people out and send it to them and whatnot. It kind of helps each other out. And as you get more serious into it, maybe you are competing for a world team spot. Then at that point, maybe you drop some cash to get new equipment, because obviously it does wear out over time and it's less supportive. So as you get more serious into it, so the world team guys are getting new equipment every year and things like that. But for somebody just starting out, there's absolutely ways to get used equipment and to get help on it. Everybody's really big on really helping others getting started, because that's what you need. It's not as simple as just getting in there and throwing the suit on and going. There's you have to train differently. You have to consider how much gear you're wearing at what percentages, and there's just tons of stuff to consider.
That's awesome. Let's kind of redirect the subject now, and so more about your raw training. So obviously you're not kind of gradually. Actually, before I get into this, Bryce, what you were saying about not seeing that in raw, we kind of sometimes do, right? Because people have when it's limited what you can do, right? People have their competition tightness singlet, which if you've played around with those Titan Triumph singlets, that's like a squat suit from the 90s. But it's basically what Ed Cohn was wearing when he was squatting like 950 for a double, which fair. Is it's crazy. But and then talking about switching to tighter knee sleeves and then washing their knee sleeves before the competition, and so ultimately we're all trying to get as much as we can out of what we can use. It's just what we can use is a little different, and then within those rules we're trying to make the best equipment. Everybody's trying to design the best knee sleeves, be it SBD or Super Training and the strong sleeves, or Titan, whatever it may be. So Preston, you were saying with your raw training, it pretty much follows the same weekly structure?
Yeah.
Okay. And so let's say on a day when you're working up to raw top sets, use your squat as a reference again. You were saying you finish basically at 585 before putting on your equipment and kind of moving up gradually through there. So on a week-to-week basis, and you said you don't really get above 5 reps in your equipped training. Is that pretty similar in your raw training, or are you touching on higher rep ranges more frequently?
No, I definitely, with my raw, and especially here lately, I've gotten to where I like starting cycles with pretty high rep ranges, like in that 10 to 12 range, so that we can tap into some hypertrophy, kind of a hypertrophy block, as well as increase my work capacity earlier on in training to kind of help carry over through. So I do work with much higher rep ranges. I really like 8s and 6s and stuff like that with my raw training. So that's where it does differ. I do like that higher rep stuff on my raw training, especially earlier in the cycle versus equipped training. Even most people don't even mess with 5s. That's kind of something that I don't hear much about. A lot of people, it's 3 and under.
I don't think you could even do 5s in a tight suit, could you? That would be awful.
Yeah, and that's why it's earlier in my cycle. So the way that I structure my programming and my equipment usage throughout my cycle is usually like when I'm doing my fives, it's with like the older technology, so the stretchier, maybe like the Inzer hardcore suit. So that way it's less supportive and it's less removed from raw. So I kind of progress from that raw, and I do a slow progression into the equipment rather than just day one starting my equip training session. I'm into my competition fit equipment.
Okay. Cool. So a little bit more generally about kind of equipped versus raw. Have you noticed any kind of level of culture difference between kind of the groups of lifters? So there's obviously I don't want to say that there are camps, but there's a definite group of people who only compete in equipped lifting, and there's a definite group of people who only compete in raw lifting. And so, do you notice any differences in terms of how they act or talk or feel about each other?
Maybe not about each other.
Well, that's bad wording.
Absolutely. No, I absolutely do notice a huge difference in the culture and the groups of people. So in equipment, everybody knows everybody kind of thing. When I came to my first raw meet, I remember just like, I know nobody here. Like it was me and my buddy Will, who was also an equipped lifter, and it was just like us two, and we didn't know anybody there. I had known Andy Askow, former equipped lifter, and then guys like Tony Harris and Dave Ricks, former equipped lifters. But aside from that, I just remember looking around and be like, man, there's so many new faces versus equipped lifters. Basically, anybody who's lifting equipped has been involved in the USAPL for no less than 5 years a lot of times, or they're in the collegiate powerlifting scene. So maybe they're newer to USAPL, but they're involved in the collegiate scene, so that's why they're in equipped, because equipped still does play a pretty big role in the collegiate division.
So your current focus on kind of devoting yourself more to raw competing going forward, which is what it sounds like, is that simply because of the fact you dealt with that injury and you're trying not to recreate it by using relatively lower loads more frequently, or is it just kind of easier for you right now just to do? Oh, you said it was a time issue, right? Is that what it was?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple things. That is one of the reasons. It's just much easier to do it for myself right now. Training is easier, and the time component is easier. But at the same time, for the same reason, many of us choose to compete in the USAPL and IPF. It's kind of the same reason why I'm moving towards raw. It's just that we want to compete on the highest level of competition and the most legitimate form of competition. Obviously we don't get money in this sport. We don't get a lot of things. We do it. It could be number of different factors. Some people compete for their own personal enjoyment or personal satisfaction or improvement, and others like competition. They want to compete at high levels. They want to compete internationally. That's kind of what drives me and why I compete in the IPF. And so that's kind of what's pushing me towards raw. Sport has already made the shift, but I was able to see kind of this transition from, it was powerlifting to raw, and the sport is heading that. So, I figure that's where I want to go. I want to be able to lift there. I'm not done with equipment. I'm still going to lift there because, like you had said, on the international level, the talent is still growing. The numbers are still massive. It's still extremely competitive, and I kind of like taking that angle of being able to be competitive in both, because that's not something people really do.
Absolutely. And what you said there about the kind of aiming to compete where there's basically the deepest level of competition, a lot of people don't really know. If you haven't been to Raw Nationals, it's hard to understand, and especially this year. And it's kind of what you said about all new faces. It's like I've been to Raw Nationals a few years running now, and when you're talking like 2014, you could sit down in the audience and odds on look around, and someone within arm's reach of you knew them. And this year, you went and you would have to actively seek out somebody that you knew for 15 or 20 minutes to find someone. And I mean, for me, I had a bunch of competitors there. We had a bunch of people on our team. We had all the coaches. I know several of the referees, and it was still not something that was easy to find someone because of how much it has grown. It's just incomprehensible. And the depth of talent at the top level is insane. I mean, there's no, I mean, with the exception of guys like obviously Ray and Dennis Cornelius, And a couple of the standouts, there's nobody who's really super dominating most of these classes. I mean, you obviously have some people who are. You've got your Jennifer Thompson, your Kimberly Walford, people like that. But the 52 kilo class is, or I guess was, closely contested. Marisa Inda's kind of a front runner on that. The 57 kilo class is becoming more and more closely contested, and from what I understand, Jennifer Milliken is looking to move up. So it's just cool to see so much competition that's really legitimate. It's not one person and a bunch of stragglers. Stragglers isn't the nicest word, but it's really what it ends up being in a lot of these cases. It's the show for this one person and everyone else who wanted to compete behind them.
Yeah, absolutely. And the growth of raw powerlifting has been amazing because it's been the growth of powerlifting. And that's why, hey, I'm always, if tomorrow there's a major switch, and equip lifting starts taking over again, I'm going to go there. I mean, I'm going to go wherever there's the most legitimate forms of competition, just because I'm a competitor and that's, that's where I want. The growth of raw powerlifting has been amazing. And that's why, it's even taken shape into collegiate powerlifting. And I think that's been great for the sport as well. It's just going to continue to grow. I mean, we've seen, I think they ran the numbers, the number size in the USAPL has nearly tripled in the matter of a couple of years. And it's been pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, I appreciate that about you as a competitor, knowing that now that you're kind of following the competition. That's cool, because you see a lot of people who are great raw lifters and like, oh no, I'd never compete equipped, or a lot of people who are great equipped lifters and they're like, why would I compete raw? And so it's kind of cool to see you breaking that barrier. And I think for a lot of people, it is the barrier to entry that keeps them out of equip lifting, and maybe that's why some of the more experienced lifters and a lot of actually the older equip lifters are going to say, just wait until you get hurt and you'll put on equipment and you'll understand. And I think we've all probably heard that. You see Bryce smile when I say that, because we have all gotten that talk. And do you think that's right, that it kind of allows you to train when there's limitations on your body, let's say, be it in a hip or a knee?
Yes and no. I say that because I hear the same thing a lot, but a lot of my main injuries have come because of equipment. I mean, if you think about it, if you're putting regularly, you're putting 110% to 100 and maybe even 120% of your raw max, on your back or in your hands, on a weekly basis, you're going to start having breakdowns somewhere. I think on a more short term, on a more nearsighted basis, yes, if you've got, an injury, you've got maybe a hip bugging you or a knee bugging you, throwing on a squat suit, throwing on some knee wraps, stuff like that, you'll be able to train through it. But in terms of long term, that's what I developed my patellar tendonitis that put me out for 8 months. I didn't squat for 8 months. That was because, I had the hamstring injury, and then I was training in my squat suit, and, the pressure on your patellar tendon from the knee wraps, some biomechanical shifts, stuff like that. It happened in equipment. My shoulder injury that, it really bugged me and really set me back. I don't think I benched for 4 months or so. That was in equipment. All my major injuries have been in equipment. Versus raw, I might feel a little beat up, maybe with some aches and pains, but I've never had, a raw injury that set me back for months.
Preston, let me ask you this, man. Do you think that your equipped lifting helps out your raw in, like, if you were to have spent that time instead doing only raw, like, do you think you would be better suited having had this background in equipped lifting before you did raw, or would you be better suited just being a raw lifter purely if you wanted success on the raw side? Because you hear sometimes, like, people are like, oh, well, maybe if I train, equipped every now and then, I'll be able to go heavier, super maximal, like kind of build up something that I wouldn't get just training my raw lifts.
Yeah, there's some definite carryover. It's hard to say. I think because, in the off season and even during my competition cycles, I'm still training raw a lot when I'm doing equipped. So I don't think it would have improved me to continue lifting raw during my equipped time as much as the equipped helped me, if that makes sense. It probably wasn't worded right, but basically I think competing equipped and training equipped can be very valuable for raw lifters because of the emphasis on form. You know, a lot of people may comment on my form on my 3 lifts, and I think a lot of that has come from equipped lifting because you can't afford to have bad form. You have bad form, you miss the lift. There's no getting out of the groove in equipment. Like raw, you know, you get pitched forward on a squat, you can recover. Not equipment. That bar's either going over your head or the spotters are taking it. On deadlift, you know, if that bar drifts out away from you, you can't recover from that. Same thing with bench. You know, you go a little bit too far towards your belly, you lose the lift. You go a little bit too far towards your face, you lose the lift. Everything is so you know, training for, you know, 8 to 10 years in equipment has really just really strengthened my form to, you know, and so that's really improved. And also, I think another big thing is everything's about perception, right? So a lot of guys, especially newer guys, you know, when they're lifting raw, their 90% on their back may feel overwhelming. Me, even when I've got, you know, 105% of my raw max on my back, you know, maybe I'm taking it out on my 3rd lift. Comfortable. My walk backs are easy. It doesn't feel that heavy. I think because I've had 10 years of 120 to 130% of my raw max on my back. So when I do take that 3rd attempt, it feels like nothing, and I'm able to be confident. You know, the lift portion is obviously a different story, but you know that can, I think, benefit a lifter for sure.
I just wanted to kind of expand on that topic a little bit more. So, in your opinion, Preston, what would be kind of an ideal way to develop a younger lifter? So, just for an example, say you run into a guy at the gym who's fairly new to lifting, but shows some potential, and they want to get into competing. At what point would you encourage them to get into equipment, or would you maybe have them compete raw for a few years and then transition over?
Good question.
Is there an ideal way to go about doing that?
Yeah, I definitely think competing raw for a while is the way to go, especially if they don't have much gym time prior to lifting. So, you know, say they've just been in the gym maybe 6 months and they didn't lift before that. Definitely, you know, we want a solid base. That's the whole thing. You hear people talk about building a base. I think you've got to have a big base to lift equipped. You've got to be familiar with the lifts. I mean, when you're doing something rep after rep after rep, you know, your form's going to improve. You know, those neuromuscular connections improve. At that point, when people are looking to be more proficient, then you can start throwing on the equipment. So I think that's like a couple of years down the road, because people can get injured in equipment if you don't have a strong base. You know, if your form is kind of all over the place, you know, you've got some knee valgus, knees caving in. You know, if you've got, you know, loads, if you've got overloads, you know, more than what you're used to dealing with, and you have your knees caving in, that's just much more likely to get hurt. Or if you're getting pitched forward, you know, with a heavy squat, different. If you don't have a strong and your form's not, you know, concrete, can definitely expose you to a higher risk of injury.
Let me ask you something too, just about lessons from equipped, kind of helping out raw. I was having a conversation with Natalie Hansen about perception of pain, and how in equipment, nothing is comfortable, and just as a part of the normal lift, you're in a lot of pain. You know, like the suit is bunching up around your hips, the bench shirt is, you know, breaking blood vessels in your arm, you know, your knees feel tight, you panic and you want to get them off. These are things that in most cases raw lifters don't really ever have to experience. Do you think that your perception of pain has changed over time?
Yeah, well, you know, like I said, I competed for a solid, I guess, 7 to 8 years equipped before I even competed raw. And that was one thing. I did my first raw meet, and I was like, that was easy. Like, and like that was so less stressful. And I feel like I can, you know, when I finished an equip meet, I feel like I got hit by a train twice, and I'm pretty messed up for the next 3 days. But you know, after I finished a raw meet, you know, so I think that's why, like, there is that difference. There is that kind of conditioning to the pain with equipment. And that's when I went raw. But of course, somebody who's never done equipment may be like, oh man, I feel so beat up after a meet, blah, blah, blah. It's just that difference. It's an experience thing from equipment that, I have something to compare it to, because it's all about perception, right? It's all about point of view.
Interesting.
I think in this case, it might be more about the absolute load in terms of how your body feels, more so than the equipment leaving you feel beat up, which I can totally attest to. Bryce, you were very generous in your description of what a bench shirt feels like. It feels awful. And again, I was wearing like a training fit F6. Not even, I can't imagine. Like, I saw Blaine Sumner take his shirt off at the Arnold, and his back was like destroyed, bleeding. It was amazing. But so it's I think it has a lot to do with the fact that you're lifting 10, 15, 20% more on a lot of these lifts too. It's strictly the fact that for you, for example, Preston, your best raw competition lift is a 750-pound squat, whereas your best competition squat equipped is going to be 871. And so it's a tremendous difference in weight, and strictly in terms of how much your structure has to handle. So when we're talking about how much your body can tolerate in terms of just pounds on your frame, your best competition squat in a raw competition is submaximal. When you think about it in that perspective. So it kind of explains why you would leave those competitions feeling a little better. The only lift really that would you'd have a comparable amount of just structural fatigue would be like the deadlift, because you really don't get a lot of pounds out of the deadlift suit.
Right. But it can be very mentally fatiguing, and the amount of pain for sure involved. And like for the knee wraps, like my knees may be tore up, for the next couple of days. Especially I use the insert gripper wraps, so that rubber's really, that skin behind your knee is, can be pretty sensitive. So for the next couple of days, even just bending your knees and stuff, that skin's can be a little bit sensitive, especially around your hips with your squat suit, and triceps, and your deltoids on your bench shirt. So, and then that's like one of the main things, especially why I can't wear my gear as tight as many people do, is I don't handle the pressure well to my face, because with this tight squat suit on, when you're going down with that much load, it literally feels like your face is going to explode. It's like one of the worst feelings, and so that's why I can't wear my suit as tight as others, because I just like, it is what it, say what you want, but it's like, I just can't. Some people are a lot tougher than me. I'll say it nicely. Some people are a lot tougher than me in that regard. I got to wear my suits a little bit looser, because you just that pressure to your face. Same thing with the bench shirt. It's pretty insane. That's why, people's face. You'll see Joe Cafolino. He's one that comes to mind. His face will just be like dark purple after an equip meet, like dark purple, like pretty vivid.
I guess you could make a pretty fun collage of photos, just captures of the faces of equipped lifters in their third squats in the hole, and kind of have one of raw squatters next to it, and you could see the difference illustrated between equipped and raw lifting just in that. And that would be kind of a fun thing to do, actually. Adam Palmer, if you're listening, you're probably not, but you should do that.
Or be like raw lifters showing their battle scars, like a torn callus, and like equipped lifters is like their back is just like blue and
just
bleeding.
Destroyed, black and blue bleeding, broken blood vessels in their face, and we're like, guys, I tore my hand open on my third deadlift. No, so advice for new lifters, Preston, who want to get into equip lifting. What would you say is kind of the best place for them to start? Let's say someone who's not a total novice, but like so myself, for example, I've been powerlifting for quite some time now. So if I decided, this is the year I want to try equip lifting, where do I start?
Honestly, I think there's a big culture of helping people who come, to ask for help in equip lifting. And I think coming to somebody who is established and has been doing equip lifting for a while would be a great resource. And more times than not, they're going to be able to give you whatever advice you want and be able to help you with training questions, with gear questions, with whatever. And so I think that's the main thing, is getting somebody who's experienced in your corner to help you out. Because like I said, it's not as simple as just, day one, in equip lifting, I'm going to straps up on my deadlift suit and I'm going to put on, whatever on the bar and try to pull it. There's ways, that you got to structure your training differently. And same thing with bench. You're not just throwing on your bench shirt day one and trying to touch your chest with it. You're starting with like a freeboard, day one, you're just hitting 3 boards. Week 2, maybe hitting 3 boards again, especially if you're new, and kind of working through that range of motion and kind of, feeling out the waters before you get into it. But I think the main thing is just reaching out and trying to get help. Don't try to do it on your own. Really try to get plugged in with the right people, even if they can't be there physically. Reaching out through somebody remotely for just advice and help, and some technical review of videos and stuff like that can really be, I guess, the best way to go about things.
So ideally, for equip lifting especially, because you're talking a lot about how the equipment is physically on your body, it would probably be more important to get some degree of like in-person coaching, be it with a team or with an actual coach once a week or something at minimum, so you have an opportunity to have someone tell you, no, you've got your knee wraps on wrong, your squat suit isn't hiked up high enough, your bench shirt is at the wrong angle, etc. And so things like that, things that you wouldn't necessarily observe in a video.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be ideal. That would be ideal to get somebody who knows what they're doing, and I think that's more important than them physically being there, is that they know what they're doing in equipment. And yeah, I mean, that would be ideal to have somebody there, because there are tons of adjustments you can make to the equipment. Even people will go as far as, with sewing machines, or say, because everybody's body, they have different proportions and such. They're like, oh, those hips are really loose in that squat suit. Let me sew it up for you. We'll take an inch out of the hips or whatever, and that might, fit you better, give you more support, make things feel a little bit better. And also, I mean, just things on the bench shirt. I mean, there's adjustments you make with, twisting the sleeves and pulling down the collars for different weights. So like when you're going on a 3rd attempt bench, you might jack that shirt down, as they would say, and really pull down that chest. And you can even pull down that chest plate and even reach in and kind of pull up your chest a little bit. And that's going to give you way more support than if you ride it up high. So there's tons of actual physical adjustments you make according to what's on the bar.
Okay. I like that.
So that might be something that you're not going to get from somebody who's inexperienced, knowing how to work the gear. And I think that's what's the takeaway, is knowing somebody who knows the gear that can kind of help teach you the tricks of the trade,
Cool. So unless you guys have any other questions, I think we're pretty much coming to a wrap here.
All good for this one, man.
Sweet. So first off, thank you, Preston, for taking time to talk to us. It's it's not often that we get an opportunity to chat with someone who makes the transition that you do, from being a very elite equip lifter to a very elite on the path to extremely elite raw lifter. And so it's definitely cool to be able to talk with you about this. Once again, thanks to our sponsor, LBD Fitness. Again, you can pick up anything from them at lbdfitness.com. I am Hani, Instagram at Hani_TSA. We got Bryce and Eric, who are Bryce_TSA. If you're listening to this and you don't follow him, I'll frankly be surprised. And Eric is Eric_TSA. Preston is Preston Turner. Do you have 242 on your Instagram? I don't know. No,
242.
Okay.
That was just on my Skype, because that's from 2010, the OG IPF weight classes.
Yeah, you're super old school. You're not only equipped. I am a 242 competitor. No, yeah. But
Preston, what's coming up next for you competition wise? And do you want to plug anyone or plug any websites or anything like that?
Yeah, well, just you guys. Appreciate you guys inviting me on here. This is a first for me. And it's really exciting, and I'm really honored and humbled by it. I love to be able to have the platform to be able to kind of speak to people and give people insight into both equipped and raw, because there isn't many people that have that experience. And so, I think there's great ups to both sides. I think it's fantastic for people to do both. So, I appreciate you guys having me on here to be able to talk about this stuff. But yeah, no, that's about it, man. I really appreciate it.
What's your next planned competition, Preston? Where can we expect to see you competing next?
I'm not 100% sure if I'm doing Raw Nationals or not. That is the plan as of now. Like I said, this is year 10 for me competing, and I basically haven't had a year off. So I'm feeling a little burnt out right now, to be honest. Trained real hard for the Arnold, had a blast, did well. I was really happy about that. but you know, maybe take a year off. Not 100% sure. We'll just see. I'm kind of just having some fun, doing some other things, and still training, but just giving my body a little bit of a rest. Hips and knees and everything's feeling a little bit beat up. So
I mean, I got to interrupt you a little bit, Preston. We all know you took 8 months off not that long ago.
This is 2015 or so. But I still competed that calendar year.
I know. I'm just kidding with you, man. I'm just kidding. No, cool, but thanks for coming on, Preston. I think we're going to wrap it up with that. Guys, thank you, and thanks for listening to the TSA podcast.
Thank you guys so much.
Soon.